So now let's work around with UV and projection inside of Cinema 4D. So in order to work with UV and projection, first I'm going to take a sphere right here. So let's say I want to make something like a solar system. I want an Earth. Let me start by Earth and a Moon. So I'm going to control click and just drag it around, and now I'm going to drag this up. So let me just resize this out. So let me just resize this out just like that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in textures to this. So for that, I'm going to double click and drag the material over here. I'm also going to click and drag the material onto this object right here. So on the material, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the texture, and here you can see that there's different textures available. So I'm going to go on to my folder. Let's say, for example, my UV folders. Here I got some textures. Let me choose the Earth map texture right here and open that out and press yes. Once I do that, you can see that two Earth are visible. If I were to press Ctrl R right here, you can see that the Earth map has been applied. So I want this to be the moon, so I'm going to apply another material, click and drag it over here. And for this one, I'm going to delete the Earth material. Let me select this material right here, and over here I'm going to choose a texture and then choose the moon right here. Press yes. There you go. That's the moon texture right there. If I were to press Ctrl R, you can see that the moon texture is right there. There's the Earth and there's the moon, just like that. So now what I'm going to do is let's see how this is actually possible. If I were to go to the texture, and if I were to click on the texture, you can see that the texture is flat. The ice balls at the top actually became this, and the ice balls at the bottom actually became this one. So in Antarctica and North Pole, as you can see right there. So how is this happening is what you can see out of the UV edit panel right here. So if I go to UV edit panel, if I were to select this, you can see that this is how it is unwrapping. If I were to press NB, you can see the polygons right here. You can see the triangles at the top. These are the triangles, and these squares are represented by these squares. So everything is being stretched out, as you can see right there. So this is how it unwraps. If you were to go to layers, you can see nothing right now, but if I were to go to materials right here, enable this, you can see that this is how it unwraps. If I were to go over here, this is how it unwraps, just like this. So this tag, for example, might represent this one, as you can see right here. We're going to learn more about UV editing in the further lessons. This is how it works. So let me just go back on to my my standard menu right here. So that is how it works. So it wraps around everything out. Control R, and there you go. You got these things without having to actually work around much with the model. So let's try around a few techniques. So I'm just going to delete this out. And over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a plane surface and turn this into something like a paper. I'm going to double click, drag in a material right here. And on the material, let me just go to the material. I'm going to click on the texture, bring in something like a paper. And there you go. This is a paper, just like that. So if I were to resize this, I can press C to convert this into a polygon. And I can resize this. It looks like a paper, as you can see right here. So that looks like a paper. Control R, and there you go. It's a flat piece of paper. I can also, let's say, duplicate this. So I'm just going to click and drag this out here. Let me select the material, click and drag it, put it aside just like this. And there are two pieces of paper right now. So you can see that this is really realistic and then quite fast to work with as well. So let me just delete these out and work around with more materials. So I'm going to go over to something like a floor. Let's say, for example, over here there's floor. So I can apply a material to this as well. Double click this, click and drag the material. And then in this material, I'm going to add in something like a grass texture. So in the texture, there's the grass. Let me press open. Let me press yes. That's the grass texture, you can see, and this is seamless. You can also go over here and then you can work around with its offset right here, onto the left, onto the right. There's the vertical axis right here. You can also work around with the length. You can decrease the length right here, increase the level of detail, just like that. And that is how you create a floor of grass. So you can see that this is how it actually looks up. Let me just add in something like an environmental light right here, like a physical sky. Let's see how that looks. So if I were to press Ctrl R, you can see that that is how it looks. It looks like a field right there out of the blue, just like that. Press Control R and you see the skyline, everything right there, just like that. So let's work further around with this. So I'm going to add in, let's say, something like woods right here. So I'm going to go over here, let me make something like a plank. So I'm going to grab in a cube for this one. That's a really large cube. If you had asked me, 200 centimeter is quite long. So I'm going to go over something like 50 centimeter right here, 50 centimeter. Let me drag this on to the top right here, and I'm going to press C so that I can work around with its height and width, just like this. So let me make this something like a wood texture. So I'm going to double click this, click and drag it onto the material right here, and onto the material. Let me click on the material. I'm going to click on the texture, and over here you can see that there's the wood texture. So if I were to click on this and open it, press yes, you can see that the wood texture is here. But onto the side, it does not really look that great. It looks squeezed up. Over here at the bottom, it seems that it looks fine. It's quite dark, you cannot see it. And anyways, let's rotate it to actually see it around. You can see that it looks quite good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work around with the texture right here. So I'm going to go over here onto the texture right here. There's the Uwb mapping, which is the default mapping right here. Spherical is if you were to work around with the spherical mapping, and there's cylindrical for cylindrical mapping. So these are different sort of mapping we're going to look in a while. So the one that I'm going to choose for this one is cubic mapping right here. This actually gives you access to cube. If you were to select the UV tool right here, you can see that there's a huge cube actually rotating this around. So I can use my scale tool, and you can see that it affects this cube right here. And once I resize this, you can see that it resizes the texture as well. So if I were to resize everything out, so let's say I'm going to resize this, I'm going to resize this right here, you can see that it works around with the cube. So if I want to fix the texture, I can just pull it out, make it like a cube, so that it actually works around with the tile right here. So what I'm going to do is on the tile, I'm going to work around with its repeat length. So I'm going to go around here, increase the number of tile, maybe click and drag this tile, and you can see that the tile length actually works around. So vertical and horizontal tile, just like this. There you go, that's the tile. So if I want to add in some details onto it, you can use something like subdivisions and everything else right here. But anyways, let's work around with this one now. So now if I want to have multiple of this, I can simply make a copy. So let me just grab this, grab the object down right here, just like this, and I'm going to control and click it to make a copy of this. And maybe I want to create a rotation of this. So I'm just going to rotate this just like that, and I'm going to keep it aside just like that, right? So I'm just going to keep it right over here, and there you go, that's the wood tile right here. Let me just press Control R to see how it looks. You can see that due to the environment, you can see the shadows, there's the texture right there, and the shadows appear as well, and it really looks like a wood tile right there. So that's how you can work around with the texture, just like that. So let's work around with different types of mapping right here that we actually saw right here. So for that, I'm going to delete everything out. I'm going to delete every object right here, even the environment. I'm just going to use a sphere as my object of choice for this one. So I'm going to go over here, double click on this, click and drag the mat, and then over here I'm going to use a texture. So I'm going to go over to the texture, and over here you can see that there's the earth map. So let me just open that out, press yes to see how everything looks. Right now the spherical map is being used. So I'm going to go to the UV option for this one so that we can see what we can do with it. So I'm going to go over to the map option, Uwb Mapping. Uwb Mapping is default one, spherical is the default one, as you can see. So I can enlarge the sphere, as you can see right there, and it affects the mapping. So this is like a spherical mapping right there, which affects how it looks like. So if I were to actually drag this up, you can see that that is how you can work around with how the map looks like. So it works like a sphere, and the sphere is projecting everything. So think of it like a projector projecting from all over the space. So let me just select this out, and here's the spherical mapping over here. Another one is the cylindrical mapping right here. So it turns the paper into a cylinder and maps it out from the side just like that. There's also a different type of mapping, like a flat mapping right here, which projects everything as a flat map, as you can see right here. So on the back, on the front, you can see that everything works out well. So I can move it onto the left, onto the right. So on the flat, everything seems like good, but if I were to go over to the side, you can see that everything skews up. So it's something like an overhead projector, just like that. So if I were to just reduce this in size, you can see that how the map functions. Right from the front, functions like this. From the side, functions like that, just like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this map out again. Let's see different type of maps available to this. So you got flat, you got cubic right here, which we used in the previous lesson. That is when we applied the wood texture. There's also frontal, which actually projects everything out of the front camera. So it projects it according to how I actually look at it right here. That's interesting as well. That's the spatial, just like this, as you can see. So you can move around, and that's how projection happens for this one. And there's also the default one that we actually use with last time. Shrink wrapping is there as well, as you can see. So it's just like a spherical wrapping right here and wraps around a certain space right here. And there's also camera mapping right there. So now once I turn on camera mapping, you can see that nothing actually happens. The texture actually disappears. That is because it needs a camera. So I'm gonna click on a camera right here and on a sphere. So I'm going to drag in the camera. So on over here, you can see that there's a camera once I actually click that. So I'm going to drag the camera onto the camera, and you can see that with the camera angle, it actually reflects it out. So camera angle projects the flat surface right there. So if I were to click on the camera, I'm going to select the object. If I were to change the camera, you can see that the camera actually projects everything out. So depending on the camera, you can see that you can zoom it around just like this, and you go further, it enlarges just like that. So that is how a camera projects an object, the texture onto the sphere. So that is how you can work with UV and projections inside of Cinema 4D. Hope you guys learned something as always, and as always, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.